Did you and Helena catch up?
We did.
Did you tell her that you f***ed her outie at the Orpo?
Ooh, man, the tensions are at an all-time high, and nearly every character is grappling with a deep sense of dread. The cracks in Lumon's foundation are spreading, and even those at the very top are starting to feel defeated, questioning everything they stand for. They're all at a precipice, and soon will need to choose a side. But going against Lumon seems futile, failure, inevitable. This episode dropped some major clues about reintegration and the true nature of Lumon's work. And we also got a closer look at the leadership team and saw just how deeply their loyalty lies. Let's break it down. Real quick before we jump in, I gotta say a huge thank you for supporting my channel. I just hit 1,000 subscribers and I really can't believe it. A special shout out also goes to my first ever channel member, Cass. Thank you so much for your encouragement. It's everything to me. Now, let's get into it, shall we? The episode opens with an unknown man slowly walking the hallways of the severed floor, eerily whistling a sea shanty-like tune. The scene instantly reminded me of Kill Bill Volume 1, the whistling unsettling, eliciting a scary feeling like one of our four tempers, dread. It's quickly revealed that he's the exports hall guy, the one whom Felicia from O&D told Irving about, who transports items from O&D to the testing floor. The showrunners make it a point to conceal his face, but I don't think it's for some future twist or reveal. I think it's because what matters most is what he represents, not who he is, which we can discern from the ominous whistling, much like with Elle in Kill Bill. The melody he is whistling comes from a song called Back Home in Derry, about the Irish Rebellion of 1803. The rebellion was a failure, and the rebels were exiled to Australia. This feels like a warning, a clue about what's going on here. Like the Irish Rebellion, the Innies Macrodat uprising failed, and trying again seems futile against a megapower like Lumon. In the song, the Irish rebels are sent to their death aboard a prison ship, with the lyric, "Taking souls to Hades by twilight," drawing another parallel to the Greek myth of Orpheus and Eurydice that we talked about last episode, where Mark represents Orpheus traveling to the underworld, or Lumon, to save his wife Gemma. And also, like the Irish rebels, Irving is said to be exiled by ship after he was fired last episode.
Irving B's outie has departed on
an elongated cruise voyage. Yeah, I know. Is he going to come back or not?
There also seems to be a deeper connection here relating to water and Lumon. For example, there's the giant water tower, Woe's Hollow and the waterfall, the lakes that are near the town, and the Lumon logo itself with the teardrop motif. We even see it represented in the architecture of the town. And most importantly, there's the Kier painting above the water fountain. We see Kier on a mountaintop overlooking what looks a lot like the Great Lakes region. The melody of the whistle song is also used in the song Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, about a carrier ship that wrecked in Lake Superior, killing all passengers aboard. Now, I don't think this is a coincidence, and I think it hints that the Great Lakes area is the location of Kier PE and of Lumon's secret testing grounds. Which brings us back to Irving's dream from last episode and the Montauk Project, a conspiracy theory about secret government experiments during the Cold War era. During this time, the U.S. conducted several controversial projects related to psychological warfare, mind control, propaganda, and ideological manipulation. Drugs and chemicals like ether, which we know Kier had factories for, were used in experiments like the infamous MK-Ultra. Many of these projects were conducted without the public knowledge or consent, often targeting minority groups or prisoners, treating them as test subjects, not people. Sounds a lot like Lumon, right? The Great Lakes area also served as a testing ground for similar projects during the Cold War. The region provided an isolated environment for radio wave and signal interference tests. The U.S. Air Force ran radar and communication experiments near Duluth, Minnesota, along Lake Superior, which seems relevant given Lumon's experimentation with brainwave signals that might also require seclusion. Additionally, the Great Lakes region is home to the largest Navy training installation, an interesting connection to Irving's Navy background and the reference to his dog, Radar. And then there's that weird Amish haircut having Lumon boss with the frolic tattoo, who happens to be named after the biggest island in the Great Lakes, Drummond Island. So is Lumon using the islands on the Great Lakes, the town of Kier, located there? Like severed people literally shipped off to Lumon to work as prisoners, like the Irish were exiled to Australia. In both of the songs we talked about, there are ships that ultimately lead people to death, whether physically or more metaphorically, stripping away their freedom, individuality, and their humanity. And whatever state PE is in, it's made clear it's controlled by Lumon. I think Lumon is possibly in cahoots with the government and military and has continued Cold War-era experiments, long believed to be shut down. The location of the Ortbo could be on another nearby private island that Lumon owns. I have a feeling this is all related to why Mark's project is also called Cold Harbor. There's one more lyric, though, that has me thinking from the song In the Wreck of Edmund Fitzgerald, when the waves turn the minutes to hours. Now, the government experiments didn't only focus on biological and psychological warfare, but there's also claims about time travel, parallel universes, and other paranormal activity. What if this lyric is another clue about how time works when severed, or even when on the Lumon Islands?
But the relativity's fucked.
In my last video, we talked about how reintegrated memories seem to appear to Petey real time, hinting at something like the movie Arrival, where time is not linear and past or even future memories can be lived in the present. That maybe Mark can interact with the past to change his future. There's definitely something up with time, or even parallel universes where time might be different. For example, we see Audi Mark switching watches before going to the severed floor. Maybe the seconds and minutes don't last the same there, or they're spending more or less time as their Innies than they're led to believe. We also see a lack of actual dates, with Irving's life being counted in quarters. Is this to prevent the Innies from the ability to accurately gauge the time they've spent there? And then there's Ricken's book. It very obviously was already repurposed as seen in the fourth appendix about Dieter and in the speech patterns of the older Egan doctrine.
And the world shall become but your appendage.
Or the most vital appendage of the greater organism, or hive.
Yet in this episode, we see Ricken and Devon actively working on his rewrite for Lumon. What's up with that? It would seem things are happening chronologically based on the reintegration sickness happening to Innie Mark and him getting wet after the weekend thing at the Ortbo. Ricken also mentions Schrödinger twice in his book, possibly hinting at Schrödinger's cat in quantum physics. In that thought experiment, the cat is in a box, both dead and alive, until someone opens the box and takes a look, which I think symbolizes Gemma being both alive and dead, depending on whether Innie or Audi Mark is looking. I think it could also suggest something deeper about brainwaves and superposition, explaining how severance works by altering how a severed mind perceives reality, or even proof of alternate realities, the severed floor being one of them. Okay. I know y'all thinking I'm taking this too far. This show is just meant to be a critique on capitalism, right? Well, get your tinfoil hats on, because we're about to go deeper. Remember the dental tools the exports hall dude takes from O&D? Well, we get a clue about their purpose from the Lexington letter, a letter sent to a newspaper by a former severed employee. They told me that after a screening process, I'd have a small, totally painless chip inserted into my brain. That freaked me out for a beat, but they assured me it was easier than getting a cavity filled. During the Cold War era, people reported picking up radio signals through their metal dental fillings. There were even rumors that the CIA and KGB used fillings as listening or recording devices or implanting microchips for mind control. So what if Lumon's severance procedure involves secretly implanting something in the teeth as well, alongside the chip? The smile wall in the Perpetuity Hall and the comment about Helly's weak enamel kind of seal the deal for me that this is all connected. It seems clear that Lumon's control goes beyond just corporate greed, that something even darker is happening if you can imagine it.
Whatever humans can imagine, they can usually create.
Helena faces dread too. She's terrified of going back into the severed floor, almost murdered twice, and now the Innies all know who she is and how she tried to trick them. She's told she must make the sacrifice, that she is critical to getting Mark to finish Cold Harbor. And here we see that even Helena, a member of the executive team, is subject to similar bullshit manipulation tactics as the worker bees, as seen when Drummond offers Helena an obligement session, which sounds an awful lot like the wellness sessions given to the Innies when they need a motivational boost to get back to work.
And the work is mysterious and important.
She is told the same thing the other Innies are told about the work they do. I guess she's not as in charge as I originally thought. She too is in the dark, expected to follow orders blindly.
And Father approves.
Father encouraged it.
Here we see Helena's humanity seeping in. Not only is she asking as part of the chain of command, but there's an underlying question of if her father even gives a shit about her safety, her life. We've seen moments where she longs for real love and connection, like when she watched the videos of her Innie kissing Mark, something it seems she's never had, familial or otherwise.
The medical team says your tempers will rebalance quickly.
At first, this sounds like reassurance. She won't have to carry the weight of the trauma she's experienced, that her dread will soon go away. But also, is this confirmation that the severance chip is designed to neutralize human nature? Or has Helena's father been controlling her emotions for years, shaping her identity from childhood through some other means? All throughout the episode, we see a constant push-pull between Lumon's dehumanization tactics and the characters fighting to reclaim their sense of self. It's an interesting development that Helena is also dehumanized, like the Innies, chained to her identity as an Egan. Seeing her Innie self is like seeing what she could have been, that love and passion are a part of her true nature.
She doesn't have the right to take my identity.
When Helly is reawakened, she feels violated, stripped of her identity by her outie. The other Innies no longer trust her. Helena's exposure as a mole has effectively erased Helly's identity as a friend and lover. She too becomes chained to the Egan identity and in a way recreated in Kier's image. Much like Mr. Milchick and the paintings of himself in Kier, he too seems to be going through a bit of an identity crisis. You see, the more exposure to the company's leadership that Mr. Milchick gets, the more he realizes the hypocrisy and questionable morality of Lumon. I worked at a corporation for almost 20 years before I too experienced severance. Well, not like the microchip, but you get it. Milchick's path is all too familiar. The American dream facade. From childhood, you're told to get a good job, work for a big company that will provide stability, and become a part of your family. When you're young and naive, you believe that hard work and loyalty will get you ahead and that the company values are there because they genuinely care about you. And let me tell you that this type of manipulation works. Where I worked, it was a common thing to say that you bleed the company colors. This show is scary accurate. But as you become a manager like Milchick and you have the conversations with leadership behind closed doors, you see how the employees are dehumanized, just another number that needs to be met, and that these great company values are just a cover, propaganda to keep the employees in line. And the kicker is, it's all on you to be the middleman, to lie to your team, manipulate them based on leadership's whim. You're often given a complex project, not set up for success at all, and then blamed for its failure. Look at Milchick's performance review. He's handed down a clusterfuck from Cobell. The Innies were already completely out of control. No matter what Milchick did, he was bound to fail. The expectations Lumon had were unrealistic. You cannot undo the awakening the Innies had. And also true to real life, these performance reviews purposefully leave little to no room for rebuttal, often masquerading as a discussion when reality is just a one-sided conversation.
Hence I may colloquially employ
Anti-deflections will be heard after the lunch break.
This is a prime example of the gish gallop, a tactic where a person overwhelms their opponent by throwing out a bunch of arguments, regardless of their validity, making it almost impossible to address everything in the time given, and often making someone flustered or missing key points.
Paperclip was installed back to front.
Mark too felt some of this struggle when he was initially promoted to the MDR lead. He was blamed for Helly's suicide attempt, even though it was really beyond his control.
This happened on your watch, Marcus.
And just like Milchick was scolded for implementing kindness reform, Mark was yelled at for bending the rules out of compassion for Helly.
So get your little ass back to your desk and stay there until you're told to move.
And Milchick, he's still trying to lead MDR in his own way.
But I want you to know that I truly respect each and every one of you. And I don't want to be your jailer.
I think Milchick is sincere when he says this, but he's quickly learning that the higher up you go, the more cold and ruthless you are expected to be. Milchick is starting to feel dread, too, of the role he plays as a leader of the severed floor, the way he's told to treat the Innies.
They're fucking animals.
But more than anything, he's dreading the realization that to Lumon, he too is viewed like an animal. Everything he's believed in is clashing with his identity, especially as a black man in America.
Our experiences here have been similar in some ways. We face similar challenges, and perhaps the paintings and the somewhat complicated feelings they evoke.
Natalie has that look again, and it's dread. She's afraid to speak her true feelings. Imagine climbing so far up the Lumon ladder, believing you're truly valued, only to realize they'll always just see you as black. They've turned the Kier images into blackface, a ridiculous, insulting caricature. And with everything we suspect about Lumon, their inhumane experiments, their disregard for severed minds as real people, it hits way too close to home for Milchick that his leaders do not seem much different from the slave owners who once saw black people as nothing more than property. Milchick's reality is shattering. He's questioning everything, realizing he's kind of been like the token black man for Lumon. He's starting to feel like Snoop Dogg at Trump's inauguration, a complete sellout. And so just as the Innies have had an awakening, rejecting Lumon's suppression of their identity, Milchick is going through one too, almost like a midlife crisis. I think the doubts and ideas started with Ricken's book. He was seen reading this before the Innies got their hands on it.
What is it to fail? My failure to break into the literary world in my 20s was devastating, yet it taught me a vital lesson, and that to truly find my place in that world, I would first need to break it entirely.
All the failures pointed out in Milchick's performance review may have been the final straw. I think we're on the path of Milchick switching sides, helping the Innies' cause, and as Ricken puts it, he will break the Lumon world entirely. And I think we have some evidence that Milchick is turning in the form of the funeral he approved for Irving. Dylan demands a funeral for Irving, making it very clear he understands the manipulation in the semantics that Lumon uses when calling it a retirement, not allowing them to whitewash history.
You shouldn't let them have a funeral. It makes them feel like people.
And Miss Wong, girl, she's cold-blooded, but a perfect reflection of how the real world works. There's always someone younger, more eager, and more willing to do whatever it takes to climb that ladder. Miss Wong embodies that ruthless ambition. Milchick's performance review highlights his unorthodox approach to managing the Innies, turning away from dehumanization tactics with the kindness reform and the Ortbo. The funeral is one and the same. But I can't help but think that the funeral, specifically the giant freaky Irving melon head, was all on purpose, to help the Innies. In the last episode before Irving was exiled, he yelled to Dylan to hang in there. Not just words of encouragement, but a secret message to Dylan to check the hang in there poster that's in the break room. The Irving melon head is positioned directly facing the poster, as if to say, "Look over here, motherfuckers." Maybe Milchick saw Irving hide it on surveillance and he's helping the Innies in subtle ways. There's also an interesting find in the Lexington letter. The editor of the newspaper is named Jim Milchick. In the correspondence, Jim shuts down claims about Lumon's corruption, stating it's false, and he confirmed with an insider he knows at Lumon. I think it's pretty obvious who that is, and perhaps Milchick will eventually work with whoever Jim is to expose Lumon in the press. And speaking of sellouts, we gotta talk about Ricken. He's all about the money right now, willing to completely change the morals of his book. He describes the new version of his book as a Trojan horse, the Greek myth where soldiers hid inside a giant wooden horse, tricking the Trojans into unknowingly bringing their enemy behind their city walls.
If I can get my ideas to severed workers all across the world, it might beget a revolution.
Devin pushes back. There's not a trace of his original ideology left in the words he's written for Lumon. I think this is the start of Ricken's villain arc. He seems unbothered, only concerned with his own ego and self-interest. And let's not forget the catalyst for the Trojan War, the kidnapping of the most beautiful woman in the world, quoted as the face that launched 1,000 ships, Helen of Troy, also known as Helena. It's not too dissimilar from the story of Orpheus and Eurydice. King Menelaus fighting to bring Helen back from captivity, just as Orpheus tried to rescue his lost love from the underworld. Two different stories representing two versions of Mark that love two different women. And so is Mark the real Trojan horse, his reintegrated self sneaking into Lumon to fight for his beloved Heli's life.
Have you ever heard the story of the Glaxschuben?
And Milchick's cover story for Helena was just that, a cover. She too was a Trojan horse. Milchick's story is of the 16th century Swedish king Charles XI. The king would dress in a gray coat to blend in with the people so he could uncover injustices affecting the people. Remember that TV show Undercover Boss? Like that. Milchick claims that Helena was doing it all for their benefit.
It smells like horse shit.
Yeah, Swedish horse shit.
More like Trojan horse shit, am I right? But maybe, just maybe, Helena's not purely working against the Innies. Maybe, like Milchick, she too is turning and will stay true to her Innie Heli's promise.
I'm gonna kill your company.
Ultimately, the Severance chip is a Trojan horse of its own, positioned as a gift to the people of benefit, but once inside their head, the enemy is then released. In this episode, we also learn more about the reintegration process, that it's not a one-and-done procedure. It's something that takes several sessions assisted by medication and some sort of serum to become effective. And this shit is strange, yo. There's several different types of pills he's taking, but that drink, man. Not gonna lie, at first glance, it looks just like egg drop soup to me, and it seems kind of chewy. Where is she getting these medications and what exactly do they do? It's obvious she's not working alone and is part of some larger operation. Who would have the money and means to help her with this stuff? These sure as hell ain't Flintstone vitamins. I hope we find out more about Ragabi's group next episode.
I haven't remembered anything else.
Right. Well, maybe Innie has.
We also learn that the reintegrated memories can happen at any time, in both Innie or outie form. And Ragabi is right, Mark's Innie starts to see glitches first. And when back at Lumon, Innie Mark seems to feel dread about his fate as an Innie. He is completely defeated, scared to try to fight anymore.
I mean, isn't that kind of over?
His response is to stick to himself and get back to work. He sort of lashes out on Helly and Dylan, showing he's really traumatized by what happened on the Ortbow. Unless this is all an act. And as he's heading home, Milchick stops him to ask if he told Helly that he fucked her outie Helena. It's a really disgusting thing to say to someone given what happened. This came on the heels of Milchick's negative performance review, so perhaps he's lashing out too from the defeat he feels about his work and his place at Lumon. Or maybe this is his way to help the Innies, to light a fire under Mark, get him to stand up and fight. But here's an interesting thought. Could this be outie Mark he's talking to, experiencing a reintegration glitch? The way Mark talks to Milchick feels a lot more like his outie.
Putting the numbers in the thing.
Refining.
We also hear both Innie and outie Mark say the same line.
Because he's not dead, he's just not here. She's not dead, she's just not here.
If Milchick suspects he's talking to outie Mark, then this could be a strategic move to get Mark to start looking into Helena. After Mark goes home and is back to his outie self, the memories start coming back, and he sees himself at Lumon, exiting the long hallway from the break room onto the severed floor. He hears his wife's voice in the form of Miss Casey from a wellness session. Now, back in season 1, after Mark drunkenly ripped up his wife's picture, he starts reciting facts about Gemma in the exact same format as Miss Casey.
I loved all these things about her equally.
His subconscious was holding on to traces of his Innie's experience with his wife, despite not realizing it. Now, as his reintegration progresses, his first major recovered memory is once again tied to those wellness facts. We saw with Irving that the repetition of his paintings got through to his Innie. I wonder if for Mark, the repetitive nature of the wellness sessions with his wife served a similar purpose to cross over into his subconscious. It's really sweet, those little quirks and facts about your partner are what make you love them. That intimate knowledge, the way you know their ins and outs, is deeply personal, so it makes sense that this would persist through Severance. And then the episode delivers a massive payoff. Mark finally sees his wife alive and well. Well, kind of. Hopefully with this confirmation that she's at Lumon, Mark will loop Devin in on what he's doing. I have a feeling she's going to play a major role in getting Gemma back. And last but not least, let's talk about old Burt and Irving. This is now the second time we've seen Irving trying to get in contact with someone on the phone, while Burt stalks him in the shadows.
They fired me. I think they know what my Innie was up to. I'm telling you to...
We know Irving has a military background. His home is filled with medals and Navy gear, even hints of a family tradition of service. We've also discussed the largest Navy base in the Great Lakes region and its possible ties to Lumon. It makes me wonder, did his involvement with Lumon start as part of his military duties before he went rogue? I mean, how did he know about the testing floor to begin with, and why was it so important for him to make sure his Innie investigated it? It seems like there's someone he trusts on the outside who's aware of Lumon's activities, but maybe is afraid to get too involved or didn't quite approve some of Irving's actions.
Okay, you're not picking up, I get it. I want you to know my name.
Then there's Burt stalking Irving, just as Irving once stalked him. Burt claims it was too much of a coincidence that he was fired for an erotic entanglement at work, and the very next day Irving showed up at his doorstep. He puts two and two together. Irving might be severed, and his Innie's lover. He invites Irving over for dinner to talk, but something feels off, man. He jokes about knowing where Irving lives, but the joke feels almost like a threat. In season 1, Burt played along with the retirement narrative, even recording a farewell video, and now he's saying the opposite? Maybe he was coerced into making that video, but I get a feeling of dread about what Burt's up to. I can't shake that feeling that Burt is hiding something, maybe still working for Lumon, or possibly something else. And so, another episode down, and 5 more to go. Things are moving fast, and I'm sure we will be in for a treat next episode. I want to hear your thoughts. What are your theories and predictions? What do you think about what I covered today? Are you enjoying this season? Tell me in the comments below. As always, if you liked this video, please consider hitting that like button and be sure to subscribe for more breakdowns. Until next time, toodles.